The partial government shutdown could become the longest in U.S. history tomorrow as it begins its fourth week. Federal workers who are not being paid have begun holding protests across the country. With Democrats controlling the House, a funding deal compromise doesn't seem to be coming anytime soon. Paula Reid has more.
We don't have a barrier. If we don't have a steel or concrete barrier, we're all wasting a lot of time.
As hundreds of thousands of federal workers prepare to miss their first paycheck today, President Trump is at war over his wall.
Everybody wants us to win this battle. It's common sense. Death is pouring through.
Deliberately surrounded by helicopters and contraband seized by border agents, the president continued to portray the nation as under siege by gangs, drugs, and human traffickers.
They need a barrier. They need a wall.
But federal workers need to put food on the table.
We need our paychecks.
Across the country, increasingly desperate federal workers stage protests against the shutdown.
Hey, hey, oh, oh, the shutdown has got to go.
Even the president's most ardent supporters see no end in sight for the standoff.
I have never been more depressed about moving forward than right now. I just don't see a pathway forward.
A key issue for Republicans, the president's mixed messages on who pays for the wall. He told this to John Dickerson 3 months after taking office.
Mexico's going to pay.
100%, whole thing?
100%. They're going to be happy with it. They'll be very happy to pay.
Yesterday, the president took a different approach.
Obviously, they're not going to write a check, but they are paying for the wall indirectly many, many times over by the really great trade deal we just made.
If Democrats won't give him taxpayer money for the wall, the president says he will exercise his power to declare a national emergency.
I would say it would be very surprising to me that I would not declare a national emergency.
Jesse Weber is an attorney and host for the Law and Crime Network, and he joins us now. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
So, all right, Congress enacted the National Emergencies Act in 1976, but it didn't really define what a national emergency is. What is the president's legal authority under this act, and what is this national emergency?
You took the words right out of my mouth. It's never clear what a national emergency is, but that act authorizes the president to declare a national emergency. But it's not so simple. He can authorize it, but it places restrictions. He has to be very specific which powers from which statutes give him the authority, and where is he getting the money from? It's not like you just declare a national emergency and then he takes over. So there are several ways that he could do that. One statute gives the Secretary of Defense authorization to build military construction projects for the armed forces. Another one for national security. In fact, one gives the Secretary of Defense authority to build fences and roads to prevent drug smuggling. And you can imagine, thinking about the influx of people, that's something that you might imagine the president doing. Also, if you look at the Immigration Act, that gives the president authority to declare a national emergency if there are so many people coming in that the immigration laws can't keep up. Now, you might be saying, wow, look, these are so many justifications. The bigger question is, can he get to $5 billion? Because even if he can provide justification under one of those statutes, there's only a certain amount of money allocated for each one. In fact, for one of them, there's only $20 million. So what many people are saying is if he wants to justify this, he's going to have to justify it under several statutes to add up to $5 billion in order to get the funds to build his wall.
So then I presume that would make him vulnerable because any one of those statutes could be challenged, I presume, in the court of law, and that means it holds up his access to that money, right?
Now, there are some people who say that President Trump has the full authority to grant a national emergency. We've seen it before. He can do it. There are others, and especially with this presidency and this administration, there will be legal challenges on many different fronts. So if you first start with Congress, right? Congress has the ability to declare what public funds should be used. If they file a lawsuit, they could say the president usurped our constitutional authority. That could be their main argument. If they even don't go by a lawsuit route and they say, well, believe it or not, Congress can overturn a national emergency. Now, the way it usually works is they need a simple majority in both houses, might be able to get that, but then the president would have to sign off on it. That's not happening. So then you would need a 2/3 majority vote in both houses to get that national emergency overturned.
Right.
If that doesn't work, you most likely see it in the courts. And I really want to stress this. Congress is not the only people that can, file a lawsuit here. There are many who say, what about the people who'd be displaced by the wall? What about the people who would have benefited from federal funds if it wasn't for those funds going to the wall?
Oh, my
So
goodness.
it's other kinds of lawsuits that might come forward as well.
You mentioned the Constitution and the president seemingly, in this instance, usurping the power of the purse from the United States Congress. There is also a question, even politically speaking, about the enlargement of the executive branch. In other words, the president stepping outside of the purview of Congress to do something. For a lot of small government-minded congressmen, generally Republicans, this would sort of seem out of the norm for them.
I think it's a good education lesson. I mean, we saw it a lot with executive orders, trying to figure out what can the president do without the authority from Congress.
Every time President Obama tried one, you heard a lot of bellyaching from...
And look, you don't have to be a lawyer to know that there's a separation of powers for a reason. And I think this is a good test to explain it. There are times when there is a serious crisis going on in America when you need that unilateral authority. But is this one of those times? And our banner is this a national emergency? And I tell you this, whatever the president does, he's going to need to define how this is an actual threat, and maybe a court would uphold this. Now, here's the thing to remember, too. Even if there's a lawsuit, it takes time to file, takes time to prepare. Now, unless these people who would file suit, and again, I'm assuming that would probably happen if you were to declare a national emergency, unless they get an emergency order, like an injunction or a TRO, it might still go forward, and the construction of the wall might go forward, and whatever preparation needs to go forward as well. So it's not so simple when we throw words like, oh, he's going to declare this, it's going to be a lawsuit, it's going to be simple. Things take time. There's a practical aspect of it, and like you said, what does it mean for the president to have the authority to grant where these funds are coming from because Congress said no? There's a reason we have the laws, but it's also important to know how they're interpreted.
Jesse, thank you so much. That was really good.
Really good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.